All right, everyone. I've already greeted you. Welcome back to Assessment Evaluation second semester. I hope you're excited as I am, and I hope everybody's healthy and really keeping safe. Today's world is not safe anymore. All right, today we are going to start with Unit 4. How many of you managed to read Unit 4? Did anybody read Unit 4? Yes or no? Oh God, it's so cold. Okay, I see Tony is writing or typing rather. Anybody? Unit 4 yet? Yes or no? And you can be honest. Like, oh no, didn't. Yes, I did.
Yes, Miss, I did a bit.
You did a bit. All right, Priska, thank you. Oh, Priscilla. Priscilla, yeah. No. Okay. And everybody else? Nothing? Okay, Unit 4, what is it about? So Unit 4, we are going to have a look at it's titled Critically Analyzing Traditional Ways of Assessment versus Alternative Form of Assessment. So that's what we have there. And today we'll go through Unit 4. Obviously, we're not going to finish the whole unit, but we'll probably cover mainly the first objective. We'll look at the objectives shortly, and then cover that. So that's what we have in the lesson presentation, and then recap. But it's just going to be like a brief recap of what we will cover in today's class. So the objectives of Unit 4 are for us to define the terms traditional assessment, alternative assessment, and performance assessment, performance-based assessment. And then the second objective is for us to discuss the similarities and differences between traditional assessment, alternative assessment, and performance-based assessment. And then the last objective is now to explain how planning and delivering of the methods of traditional assessment, alternative assessment, performance-based assessments are done and implemented. What happened to the PowerPoint? That is very strange. I cannot see the PowerPoint. It disappeared. Can you see it? Oh, you gotta love technology, you guys. Can you see the PowerPoint? I can't see it anymore. It disappeared. Jeez.
No, ma'am,
You can't, yeah? Okay. Let's.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is supposed to be uploaded. Confirm. Let's try again. Why? Like, why does that have to happen? You can see it. Like, why is it not showing? Okay. Guess I have to relax. I'm confirming, but nothing is showing. Oh, come on, you guys. All right. To be uploaded. Okay, upload. So I'm starting over again from scratch. But anyways, while the PowerPoint is uploading, because I don't want us to waste time, I will just go through my notes and see what we have. All right. And so we've got assessment approaches. We do know that when it comes to assessment and teaching, those two have to go hand in hand. All right. And we cannot separate the two. I mean, how do you know that the learners are achieving what you have taught them if you are not assessing? All right. And then those assessment needs to be based on what has been taught. The PowerPoint was loading and then it disappeared. Oh, come on. For real though. Should I just talk to you without the PowerPoints or should I send you the PowerPoint? Okay, how do I send the PowerPoint? Okay, let me see something quickly. Okay. See. I'm trying to see. I'll share the notes quickly on Moodle. And I think there are notes on Moodle, aren't they? Already? Yeah, I'll just post the notes, like the ones that I'm using right now, like today. I'll put those on Moodle quickly. Unit 4. Let me just, I wonder if I can. Okay, Unit 4. Just give me a second, everybody. I have to fix this. Okay. I have to stay calm. Right? Why do I say this? All right. Okay, cool. That should work. So that we are wasting time. All right. All right. Notes, resources, file. Should we say file? Okay, I hope it will go through. You know how these files sometimes are just ridiculous in sizes, like, you know, the size is too big, blah, blah, blah. So I might not be able to do that. Okay, let's stay positive. Okay, Unit 4. This work. Let's see. What do you have to say to me? All right, there we go. Unit 4, notes. Okay, and save and display. All right, so it's on your Moodle. You can, it's not showing. Oh, now it's showing. Oh my God. All right. Anyways, in case it goes off again, like if in case the notes disappear, yeah, they disappear. The notes are on Moodle. All right. And where were we? Oh, same thing happens. Like, what the hell? And please, by all means, go ahead and get your notes from Moodle. Okay, we uploaded. All right. All right. Yes, somebody raised their hand. Okay, so I hope this will work. All right, so we have seen that. Now we're going to look at assessment. Okay, I've mentioned that we cannot separate assessment and teaching. They go hand in hand. Teaching and assessment methods used throughout the ages are still used today. That is to say, now some of the traditional way of assessment, some of the assessment that have been used in the past are still used. Some are not used as much. All right, and then the development of technology and global village. So this notion of global village has forced us to critically investigate whether we can continue or must adapt, change, or link different assessment approaches. It's like, so whatever happens out there in the world regarding assessment, in one way or the other, it always catches up with us. So that's why now today we have this concept of fourth industrial revolution. So how we teach because of this revolution or industrial revolution, then obviously how we assess as well is going to change. So which means that how most of how we are maybe assessing right now, it will change eventually to catch up with the way we are teaching. All right. And then assessment is one of the major challenges teachers have to deal with and sometimes really struggle with. Assessment is not easy. Just imagine coming up with a question that can be regarded as reliable and valid, and then assessing that effectively. That can be really, really challenging. I'll tell you that. And some of the teachers are still struggling with that. And moving on. So in the past, so what happened in the past is that the learners were seen as empty vessels. I think we've spoken about that in unit 2, right? When we're talking about constructivism and the traditional view of teaching. So the learners were seen as empty vessels. So the teacher's job is now to fill those vessels, like to pour knowledge into the learners, um, into the learners' heads. And this was very easy to assess that way of teaching, and then to now see if they have learned what we have, if they have learned what the teachers have taught them. It was really easy to assess because it was the traditional way of assessment, right? But however, now it has changed. Then the learners were very passive, all right, as empty vessels, but now they are seen as active participant, and then they are the producers of learning, like they are the producers of learning, not just the acquirer of the knowledge. And rather than the teachers now telling the learners what they need to know, the learners are encouraged to explore the material, ask questions, share ideas. However, okay, on the other hand, we are still using the traditional assessment. All right, it's the traditional assessment still dominates for some of the teachers when it comes to assessment. Why is that the case? Why do you think that the teachers are still using the traditional way of assessment? You can type your answers, you can raise your hand, and then you say your answer. You're welcome to give your response, whichever way is appropriate or comfortable for you. Why does the traditional assessment still dominates how assessment is carried out today, for example? And I hope you can hear me. I'm just not talking to myself.
Oh, let me try.
Yes, Priscilla.
Oh, I think it's about the teacher learner ratio because some teachers are having bigger classes, so it will be more easier for them to use the traditional assessment methods.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good point. Can you maybe give us an example of a traditional method of assessment, Priscilla? Or
Oh, like the normal test that teachers give to learners.
Yes, thank you. I think Simon is typing. All right, it's easier than modern. Okay, I'm assuming that is modern way of assessment. It's true, it's easier. Okay, we'll see why. Because it's I mean, when it comes to assessment, like inquiry project, so inquiry could be like could be research based projects, for instance. Those could be, okay, some of the examples. They fall back on assessment that they are traditionally used. So, in other words, when it comes to things like projects, when it comes to things like, how do you say, okay, projects, or let's say uh, some sort of performance, or some sort of uh, presentation, for instance. So those are some of the examples when it comes to alternative way of assessment. When it comes to those, it's really difficult for one to assess. As Priscilla has mentioned, if you have a huge class and you have a huge class and you need to have all the students present, that's gonna take up so much of your time. All right, it's gonna be, yeah, it will take up so much of your time. And then to ensure that you are very consistent in your grading of this presentation, it will take you time to set up a rubric, for example, or criteria that will help you stay consistent in your marking. All right, so that's why most of it just to uh, rely on traditional way of assessment. As Simon has said, traditional way of assessment really seem to be very easy. It's easy for one to carry out, but setting it though, it's also another challenge. All right, and not a lot of teachers are very proficient when it comes to setting up appropriate traditional, and air quoting, traditional assessments. All right, and now we're going to look at some of the ways that the teachers uses the traditional way of assessment to assess inquiry projects. So what do they do? Even though they have got, inquiry projects, for instance, they still do the objective tests. And objective tests are things like fill in the blanks. These are all part of the objective test, multiple choice, matching, the predetermined answers already that needs to be filled in, basically. And then we have got the standardized testing. So here's the assessment that is done to um, determine a standard, right? Or sometimes they just don't assess at all, because the goals are too difficult to measure, for instance. There is a usage of rubrics, and then they also use research papers. Moving on, with the current movement, so it demands us, the current movement is calling us for now to switch, or to shift from the traditional assessment methods to more of alternative assessment practices. All right, and then this involves, so this involves the reconceptualization of how learning occurs, because we have already seen from the constructivism, and we had got the traditional way of how language was, empty vessels, and then there's facts that the learners need to memorize or learn, and then they need to regurgitate, they need to spill out as they are. So they memorize things and they say, they write them as they are. So that's how the traditional way of learning was. But then with constructivism, things are changing. Like, they need to look at how learning occurs, and then it's very different. And when constructivism view has become prevalent, becomes more famous, more um, um, is the one that is being used more, so does alternative assessment come into play. So constructivism, or as we have seen in Unit 2, it works hand in hand with alternative assessment methods. Constructivism, okay, supports alternative assessment, and the different approaches can be categorized under traditional assessment or alternative assessment. So that's what we're going to see. We have got traditional assessment, or and alternative assessment. And then here we have to remember that they say performance-based assessment results under alternative assessment. So which means, in other words, performance assessment falls under alternative assessment. But for some reason in this unit, we are going to look at the differences between the traditional way of assessment, alternative assessment, and performance-based assessment. They are distinguished, all right? The alternative and performance-based assessment. But just know that performance-based assessment does fall under alternative assessment, but here in this unit, for the purpose of this unit, they are distinguished differently. So we will have three types of assessment that we're going to look at: traditional, alternative, and performance-based. Oh, as I've mentioned here. All right. Now we are going to look more in depth the first objective. The first objective, which is defining the terms traditional assessment, alternative assessment, and performance-based assessment. All right, and the first thing that we are going to look at is traditional assessment. So what is traditional assessment? When it comes to traditional assessment, the tests that are given to the learners by the teachers are meant to measure how much the learners have learned. All right, so we have seen that. And traditional assessment test contains different types of questions, such as multiple choice. I think, yeah, we'll see that in a little bit. So things such as multiple choice, fill in the blanks, matching questions, essay, and sentence completion, etc. All right, and then yeah, so that's what we have, right? So and when it comes to this type of assessment, okay, when it comes to this type of assessment, is this assessment is not the only way, nor the best way to evaluate what the learners have learned, to evaluate the learners, but it's the most common way, for it provides valuable information on the learner's learning. All right. Not so much on how they are learning, but on what they have learned. All right, so that's what we have there. The emphasis is mainly placed on the efficient tasks, the tests that are perceived as a demonstration of what the learners' educational abilities are. So here, as I say, that it does not really look on the process of how the learners are learning, but rather on what they have learned. So what ability they have probably attained, and through the tests that they give, then the results that they get from those tests demonstrate what the learners can do. All right, these tests are taken with pen and paper, with objective questions. And the objective questions, as I've mentioned, objective tests, these are things like multiple choice, fill in the blanks, sentence completion, to mention just but a few. They are very easy to grade, but the test only test the lower level thinking skills. All right. So when it comes to this test, it does not really test so much of the higher thinking skills, but rather their lower level thinking skills. I remember us talking about lower level thinking skills and high level thinking skills in the second, was it the second unit, right? Yes, I think, or the third unit. What are the lower level thinking skills in terms of Bloom's taxonomy? Do you remember? Do you remember Bloom taxonomy? I hope you do. Bloom taxonomy? Anyone? So we've got knowledge, yes, and a bit of understanding. Questions that focuses more on testing knowledge and a bit of understanding. Yes, that's true. So those are the lower level thinking skills. I wonder if I can. It sucks that one cannot really. Um, yeah, I wanted to show something. Mhm. That's true. That's correct, Simon. Taxonomy. Because I don't want to write everything. I just want to find the six verbs. All right, here we have them. All right. What do we have? So we have got, when it comes to Bloom taxonomy, we've got 6 levels. And the levels are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. I know, for example, Hilaria gave us knowledge. This is the old categorization of Bloom taxonomy, where they had, what did they have? In the past, they had things like knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So that is the old categorization of Bloom taxonomy. But then now they have changed it to suit the 21st century way of learning and assessing. And they've changed it to remembering, understanding, apply, um, analyze, evaluate, and create. Right? From this list of 6 verbs, the 6 categories, which one do you think are the lower level thinking skills? So which ones are the lots? Lots are lower order thinking skills. Which ones? Mm-hmm. Remember, yes. The first two, yes. It's true, it's the first two, but then when it comes to dividing them, what they have said that will fall under the lots will be the first 3, and the last 3 will be more of the hots, which hots are high order thinking skills, right? And then when it comes to traditional way of assessment, it only focuses on the lots, the lower order thinking skills. And then, okay, we have seen that. And it provides little evidence of what learners can actually do. So we know that it's what it entails is for them to remember, is to understand, but not really so much of showing that they can analyze, they can um, um, recreate what they've learned in such a way that it shows that they really can actually work with the information that they've learned. Right, so that's what they have there. And then when it comes to traditional way of assessment, like the traditional assessment, it has placed emphasis on. Okay, wait, where are we? All right. So when it comes to the traditional way of assessment, it provides information on how the learners learn and how they progress. But it provides little information on how the learners really learn, and it really mention a little bit on how they progress. It's more on what they have learned. All right. When planning the assessment, it must be done at the level and the content of what is being taught. All right. So there isn't much of what there isn't so much of what they can use the information or the knowledge, but rather what is the content that they've learned, and then you assess it exactly as it is. All right. There isn't so much of them giving their opinion of what the content is about. Traditional assessments such as spelling lies on the direct task, and efficient means to assess discrete knowledge. So here, what does it mean? So here, it has everything to do with the factual knowledge. The learners do not really apply the knowledge. They don't use it in ways that they can create let's say a similar product. They don't recreate language. For example, if here we are talking about spelling, it does not really recreate uh, reproduce or create a knowledge that is different from what they've learned. What they do is really memorize it depends on rote memorization, and then reproducing what they have memorized, for example. All right, each type of assessment depends on the purpose, so that we should know that it depends on the purpose. Like, um, why do you use certain assessment? So, for example, if we have okay, this is now to move us to the next one. So if we, okay, how do I say? When it comes to assessment, we need to understand that whatever assessment that you give your learners, it should have a purpose. Why are you giving them this type of assessment over the other type of assessment? And hopefully, the reason why you give a certain assessment is not because it's easy to administer, but rather it's serving the purpose, like to really assess the learner's ability that you want to assess in the classroom, right? And then moving on to the next point, I wonder if I have the right. I think we jumped to one. No, okay, we have already seen that. Now we are moving on to alternative/authentic assessment. But before we move on to alternative or authentic assessment, do you have any questions regarding traditional assessment? It's very easy, right? Questions? Yes or no? Before we move on. Oh, we're doing on time. My God. So, does the silence mean that there are no questions? Yes or no? Oh, yes, there is a question. Oh, yes, it means there are no questions. Oh, English. Yes, Petrina? No questions. All right. Unless Petrina has a question. You raise your hand, dear. No questions. All right, let's move on. Alternative or authentic assessment. Alternative or authentic assessment combines the traditional academic content with the knowledge and the skills needed to function in appropriately in the real world. The context, purpose, audience, and focus could connect to real world problems and situations. So, here, in other words, alternative assessment really looks at creating assessment that is similar to a replica or simulation to what really happens in the real world. All right, it's relating to solving real world problems and situations. And alternative assessment is defined as engaging in worthy problems and questions of importance, all right, in which learners must use knowledge to fashion performance effectively and creatively. The tasks are either replicas, um, analogous to the kinds of problems faced by adult citizens and consumers or professionals in the field. So, in other words, whatever assessment, the type of assessment that is given, as I've mentioned earlier, it has to be a replication of what really happens in the real world. All right. Um, and it is simply a form of assessments where the learners are required to perform a real life task. All right, a real life task. Whatever task that you give them shouldn't be abstract or just out there. It should be something that they can relate to in the real world. That would demonstrate that the he or she, the learner, has grasped the knowledge and developed the skills. All right. develop a skill or skills. It helps gauge the learner's practical application of the theoretical learning to everyday problems. So here we are moving away from just memorizing certain theories, but really applying the theories into solving real life problems. Now we are moving on. Alternative assessment. So where are we? Alternative assessment is becoming increasingly popular, for it is deemed a real need for more holistic approach to evaluating the learners. And then here we have got authentic assessment moves beyond learning by rote learning and memorization, which is done in the traditional way of assessment, all right, the method, and allows learners to construct response. Anybody, when we're talking about holistic approach, what do you think that means? Anybody? Holistic approach to teaching or holistic approach to assessment, what does that mean? Okay, we'll give you a minute. Don't even have enough time. Oh well, I'm just gonna talk to you. So when it comes to holistic approach, here we are talking about, so holistic perspective or approach is concerned with the development of every person's intellectual, emotional, social, physical, artistic, creative, spiritual potential. So here we are looking at the different dimension of what makes up a person. Rather than just focusing on what they can learn, let's say the memory, the knowledge, when it comes to authentic or alternative approach, it looks at other aspects of what makes up a person. All right. And then holistic assessment consequently allows the assessor, the teacher, to appreciate the work of the learner regarding the quality of their work. So, in other words, it really allows the assessor to see what the learner is capable of, other than what they can, let's say, memorize. All right. Here you're going to see their emotional maturity, their social ability, how they interact with other people. Do you understand? But we'll look at that a little bit later. Like, it looks at all these aspects of what makes up a person rather than just the memorization that has been dominant when it comes to traditional way of assessment. And then authentic assessment captures aspects of the learners. Oh, yeah, as I've mentioned. Okay, so the authentic assessment captures the learner's knowledge, their deep understanding, problem solving skills, social skills, attitude that are used in the real world, or simulation of real world situation. All right. Authentic assessment is set meaningful and engage. It sets meaningful and engaging task in a very rich context. All right, where the learners need to apply the knowledge, the skills, and performs the task in a new situation. So rather than just memorizing the knowledge, they need to apply all that they have learned in the new situation that represents what really happens in the real world. And then moving on, when it comes to alternative assessment, it allows teachers to then choose appropriate assessment for their learners with, let's say, depending, when it comes now to assessment, you just don't stick to one type of assessment, but rather you adapt, or you cater, or you tailor your assessment to, let's say, the different learning styles. So knowing that the learners have got different learning styles, you cannot just stick to the pen and paper, but rather look at other assessment that focuses on those different learning skills. And then also their maturity level, seeing their age and their level of maturity, then you set your assessment appropriately for those appropriate levels. If they have got any learning abilities or disabilities, then you tailor your assessment to their learning abilities as well as their um, physical abilities, for example, their physical abilities, or any other characteristics that could affect how they perform. All right. So knowing that in your classroom you have got a number of learners who have got physical disabilities, then you have to make sure that whatever assessment that you give them caters for those disabilities, all right? If they have got disabilities, you just don't focus on the ones who have got the abilities to move physically, all right? And while one learner may choose to write a response, another may perform better in role playing situations. That's why we mentioned something about the different learning styles. Knowing with that knowledge of different learning styles, then you just don't stick with one type of assessment. And then moving on, authentic assessment. Authentic assessment uh, Authentic assessment and performance-based assessment sometimes are used interchangeably, but there is a notable distinction, all right, notable distinction between the two of them. Um, a number of people see it as synonyms, of each other, so that's why they use them interchangeably. While others argue that authentic assessment puts specific or special emphasis on the realistic value of a task and the content, and the crucial differences. Uh, the crucial difference between these two is in the fidelity of the task and the condition under which it's done. So when we're talking about fidelity here, is the degree at which the degree of exactness, the degree of the similarities of a task which is being done. All right. So, in other words, when it comes to authentic assessment, the degree of exactness, the degree of similarities to, let's say, real life situation is very high for authentic assessment. But then when it comes to now performance based assessment, the realness and the exactness is not as high as authentic assessment. So that is the distinction that they're talking about here when they're talking about the fidelity of the task. All right, how exact is it to the replication of what really happens in the real world? Performance can be a little bit different. Like, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but authentic is expected to be as authentic. The word authentic, it should be as real as possible to the in relation to what really happens in the real world, everyday world. All right. Alternative assessment instruments are not only designed and structured differently from the traditional test, but are also graded and scored differently. All right. I think that is very self-explanatory. And then alternative assessment methods work well with learner-centered classroom, all right? Because with traditional assessment, that works very well with teacher-centered classroom or teacher-centered education. But then when it comes to alternative assessment, um, uh, it works well with learner centered because the learners are the center of the learning. They are in charge of their own learning. Their opinion, how they use the language, is what is focused on rather than just the knowledge itself, right? And then they are based on what the idea that the learners can evaluate their own learning and learn from the evaluation process. So, which means that the learners, okay, as I've mentioned, they are in charge of their own learning, so they can as well evaluate their own learning amongst themselves or individually. They can evaluate their self-evaluate, or they can peer evaluate, and then from this process of evaluation they can also learn. All right, they can learn from that process, and that is the emphasis that lacks in traditional assessment. And then alternative assessment also gives teachers a way to connect assessment with the review of learning strategy. All right. So which means that you have to teach the learners the learning strategies. For example, in English, which is my major, um, uh, for example, you have to teach the learners the reading skills, reading strategies, and then when you assess them, you connect. Your assessment needs to be connected to the strategies that you have taught them. All right, next we are moving on to how are we doing on time? All right, we have got 10 minutes. Okay, next we are moving on to performance-based assessment. Unless you have questions, before we move on, do you have questions, yes or no? No questions. Wait, when was that posted? Now? What's the time? Okay. Should we move on? Any questions? I don't like the idea of talking to you. I wish we could interact. I wish to talk with you. All right, no questions. We okay? Moving on. So what do we have? All right. So performance assessment is similar to the description that has been given under alternative assessment. We have spoken about that. And then it requires learners to practically perform. So here we've got performance-based assessment. So they need to perform a task as evidence to mastery of a skill or knowledge. How do you know that the learner have mastered a skill or the knowledge? They do it through the performance, like they do a practical performance that will show you that, oh yeah, here, oh, this girl has okay, the special learner has mastered what you have taught them, be it a skill or knowledge. And then performance-based assessment is defined as is a form of testing that requires learners to perform a task rather than select from already made lists. Already made list could be, when it comes to multiple choice, for example, we already have got a list of A, B, C, D, right? And it's already a list from where the learners need to select. But then when it comes to performance, they need to perform a task rather than just choosing from this list that is given to them. For example, Elena may be asked to explain a historical event, all right, through this explanation, like they need to show, like they need to perform some sort of, how the event had happened, generate scientific hypothesis, solve mathematical problems, converse in a foreign language or a target language, doesn't necessarily have to be foreign, conduct a research on an assigned topic. So those are just some of the definition that can be assigned to performance-based assessment. Yes, Lysias, question? Mm-hmm. Oh, you're gone. Do you have a question, Paulus? Lysias.
No, thanks, miss.
Oh, you have no question? No?
No, thanks, miss.
Okay, cool. All right, we are moving on. Another definition that has been given by the Northern Central Regional Educational Laboratory, they define performance assessment as the direct systematic observation of an actual learner performance and rating of what performance according to pre-established performance criteria. So learners are asked to perform a complex task or create a product. They are assessed on both the process and the end results of their work. Many performance assessments include real-life tasks that call for higher order thinking skills. So you can see here that when it comes to performance-based assessment, so is alternative assessment, the thinking skills is always high order. All right. And then we can see here that there will be a performance, right, that is done by the learners. There should be predetermined criteria. So, in other words, you should have a rubric of some sort. All right. You should have marking guide or marking grid that you use to assess. All right, to ensure that you have got some sort of objectivity, all right, rather than just too much subjective on how the learners have performed. Okay, so that's what we have there. So if the learners have got a presentation, you should have a rubric on how you're going to assess the presentation. And then here we've already spoken about that the lower skills. These are more lower level thinking skills, and then we've got the higher level thinking skills. We have spoken about that already. And then moving on, so what are the differences? Performance-based differs from the traditional assessment in that it strives for mastery of knowledge and skills, and it also measures this in the context of practical skills. So rather than just mastering the knowledge and skills, they still need to practice, they need to show, all right, that they have mastered and gained the skills that you have taught them. So they need to show it in terms of practical activities. It also focuses on the process learning, going through while engaging into. It also focuses on the process of learners, the process that the learners go through while they're engaging in a task, as well as the end product, enabling them to solve problems and make decisions throughout their learning process. So here, before I told you that the traditional method of assessment, the traditional way of assessment, it focuses quite a lot on the knowledge, like the end product. What have the learners learned? All right. But then when it comes to performance-based assessment or alternative assessment as well, when it comes to those, the learning process as well, it's considered as important. All right. The learning process itself, it also does play a role in determining if the learners have learned or they have not learned or mastered a skill or knowledge. And then performance-based assessment requires the learners to perform a realistic situation. All right, so it's similar to our generative assessment. It has to be real life, real world type of problems that they need to solve. And then they participate in specific tasks, such as interviews or performance that are appropriate for the audience and the setting. Right, and some of the examples that we have is authentic assessment, alternative assessment, and integrated performance assessment. So these are now the type of assessment that requires the learners to perform in a realistic situation. And moving on, how far are we? Time again. All right, learners must use more complex and higher order thinking skills. We have already mentioned that. And they must reason, problem solve, collaborate with others to produce individual responses. We need to have rubrics. We need to use rubrics, and then these rubrics need to be given ahead of time. All right, before you tell the learners that, oh yeah, tomorrow you have got a presentation, you have to create a rubric that you give to the learners so that they know how are they going to be evaluated, all right, and which multiple competency levels are going to be evaluated during their performance. And then it stimulates the development of other important dimensions such as affective, psychomotor, and cognitive domains, right? And so that's what it entails. That's why we say that when it comes to alternative assessment and performance-based assessment, it looks at the learner holistically, all right? It just doesn't look at the cognitive domain, but it looks at other domains such as affective, social, psychomotor, and cognitive. So what do we have in regarding? So I think here psychomotor we're supposed to have social, right, domain, because those are the ones that we're going to look at. Oh my God, we are running out of time. Do you have a class following? Or can we go through these domains? Because we have 3 domains, and those are the last. Slides that we have 3 more slides. Do you have a lesson following so that I take up? Oh no, I don't think we are going to finish. You do not? So should we continue and just finish quickly? I don't want to eat up your time, but yes, Simon, go ahead.
I have a class, miss.
Oh, you have a class, sorry. Lysias too? Do you have a class? All right. I mean, they have a class. I don't want to be rude to eat up their time. So most of you think that I should continue or just end here for today? Because we have a class tomorrow too. No, not tomorrow. We have a class. When do we have a class again? We have a class on Thursday and Friday. We can cover as much there. Is that okay? Yeah. Just finish? Are you sure?
Maybe we can end here, Miss.
All right. Yeah, I think it's fair enough to just end here. Because some people are going to class. I have a class too. All right, let's just continue tomorrow. So what we have covered so far is the definition of traditional assessment, alternative assessment, and performance assessment, and we have seen some of the characteristics of these assessments. And then we'll look further in performance-based assessment characteristics, like what does it entail, an alternative. And then we'll continue with the other objectives in the next class. All right, so thank you so much for your time. I will see you on Thursday because Wednesday we don't have a class. All right, thank you so much. Take care. Yes, Justina. Justina, you raised your hand. Thank you. Take care. Bye. Thank you, Salma. Oh, wait. I think Salma said that already. All right. Bye, everyone. I'll see you on Thursday. Just have to mark where we stopped. Bye, Alina. Where did we stop? So we ended. Yeah. All right. And again.